Hello and welcome to the Under Center podcast. I'm your host, Daramar, and I am joined by my two trusty co-hosts, my partners in crime, Fionn Malloy and Jake Woolhead. And guys, we have a very special Thursday night football preview this week, of course. It's the Rams traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks in an NFC West showdown. It's going to be some game tonight.
What an exciting Thursday night football game, having these two rivals go up against especially how they played against each other last season. I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, probably the best Thursday night we've had for a while, I think.
Yeah, 3 games in 9 weeks last year, so they got to know each other very, very well. If they didn't already, of course, being division rivals. And we're going to be speaking about the LA Rams first in this half of the show. And on the show to help us chat about the Rams, we're delighted to have two guests today. First of all, we have Cameron DaSilva from the Rams Wire. Cameron, it's great to have you on.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Not too bad. It'd be great to speak to you. And secondly, we have Rich Hammond from The Athletic, who is also the co-host of the 11 Personnel podcast too. Rich, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Hey, it's great to be with you guys.
Excellent stuff. So, Cameron, I'm actually going to start with yourself in this one. Tough loss last Sunday against the Cardinals, 37 points to 20, in probably a result that maybe not many people thought was coming.
Yeah, not something I saw was coming. I figured it would be a close game, not like the blowouts that we saw with the Rams and Cardinals in the past, but obviously the Cardinals flipped it on them and blew out the Rams with a big win. Rams just didn't have any answers on defense, and on offense, Matthew Stafford was a little bit off and just didn't have the timing right with his receivers, and just really an off game and not what you expect to see from the Rams on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and Rich, on the defensive side of things as well, the team struggled. The Cardinals rushed for over 200 yards combined with Murray, Connor, and Edmonds too, and it's definitely sort of something been a bit of a weak point early in the season for the Rams.
Yeah, they obviously they were 3-0, and people were talking a little bit about the defense because they've been giving up a lot of big plays, and that was a problem. The big pass game, the big pass plays that they've been giving up. But the thing is, in the first 3 games, they've been really good on run defense, or pretty good for the most part. And what happened against Arizona was just a total collapse. They couldn't stop anything. Not only were they still giving up the big plays in the pass game, but then they got run over by Chase Edmonds and run over by Kyler Murray a lot of times too. So it was just just a systematic failure across the board, and really kind of exposed or maybe even amplified some of the problems that they were having over the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick. Cameron, you mentioned that Stafford wasn't quite clicking last week. That's probably not a surprise. He is a new addition to the team this year, moving on from Jared Goff. What did both of you guys think initially when that deal was done, and how do you think Stafford has settled into his role so far this season? Are you happy with his performance?
Yeah, I thought that trade immediately was going to be one that worked out well for the Rams. Really just Sean McVay getting a veteran guy in who can really command an offense himself and not need much guidance. I thought that fit well, especially with his skill set off play action and throwing aggressively downfield. That's something that the Rams didn't do much of with Goff the last couple of years. So I like the trade initially, and I think he's played really well up to this point. Outside of a couple of underthrows to Deshaun Jackson and a pick the week prior, it was really, really strong performance from Stafford so far.
Silva, let me just ask you then when you heard the news, obviously you're probably delighted. I mean, there's an obvious upgrade over Matt Stafford to Jared Goff, but now, Cameron, you mentioned that he has a veteran quarterback who knows it, so he doesn't have to kind of cancel or call out the entire defense with 15 seconds left before the mic cuts off. But there's an obvious connection between Matt Stafford and Cooper Kupp, which is loads of reports coming out of them staying after practice and, having that kind of extra time together. And it's really shown on the field. Do you think there's a lot in that relationship there, or is it are we seeing the start of a good relationship?
Yeah, you are, for sure. There's no question they have that kind of chemistry. The one thing they have to watch is not to rely on that too much, though. And like we were just kind of discussing here over the last couple of minutes, I mean, Matthew Stafford was a little bit off in that Arizona game. And quite frankly, Cooper Kupp was a little bit off too. I mean, there were a couple of catches or a couple balls that maybe went off his hands or catches that he would have made in a normal situation. And I thought in that game, maybe that should have been noticed a little bit more. It's really hard to do during a game. It's hard to kind of diagnose that in real time and fix it. But they could have gone elsewhere. Robert Woods hardly got any attention in that game until late. They got Van Jefferson going a little bit, but I think they have to watch that a little bit. You don't want to become too predictable. You don't want to become too one-dimensional. But look, some of the things that Cooper Kupp does out there, and Matthew Stafford knows it and sees it. So he certainly has that trust in him. And in a tight situation, he's going to be looking for him first. But you got to be careful that doesn't become kind of a crutch a little bit. And that they don't go to that well too many times. But yeah, they've developed a great connection considering there was no preseason. They didn't play in any games together. So the fact that the 4 games into this thing, the fact that they are that connected and having that kind of success together, I think that bodes well for the rest of the season.
Sure, definitely delighting fantasy owners of Cooper Kupp all over the world, and maybe disappointing a few Robert Woods fantasy owners as well at the same time. Jake included there. But I want to actually go back to the defense there a little bit because, like you mentioned, they were number 2 ranked last year. And they have slipped down the ranks at the start of this season, albeit it's still early days. But I want to talk maybe about the defensive line because obviously Aaron Donald rightly gets all the headlines for being probably the best defensive player in the league. But what they have lost, especially in the offseason, was maybe that complementing piece that he tends to have on the line with him. The likes of Morgan Fox, Michael Brockers, Samson Ekubam have all gone this offseason. Is that something, and he's only had 2 sacks as well this year, Donald too. Could that be something that's maybe sort of contribute to maybe a slow start for the defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, you do. You have to have that compliment because if teams don't fear anybody but Aaron Donald, he's going to get double teamed and triple teamed, and it's just going to be a nightmare for him and for that defense. So they've been able to pair it over the last couple of years with some good edge rushing. I mean, Leonard Floyd is still there. He's a good compliment. I just think you mentioned Michael Brockers. I mean, I think that's a guy who even among some Rams fans, I'm not sure if he was really appreciated as much as he should have been, just because he wasn't putting up big numbers all the time. He wasn't putting up a lot of sacks and things like that. But he was so good, and it was in ways that you don't even really see sometimes when you're watching the games live. So I do think they lost a little bit there. They have a young guy, Sebastian Joseph Day, who's playing really well in the middle. I think he can continue to grow and be a very good complement for Aaron there. But they need that stuff off the edge too, and they've had some injuries there. They're trying to play a guy like Obo Okoronkwo back into it a little bit. But Terrell Lewis is a guy they really like, but he's had some trouble staying on the field because of knee problems. So you're right, Aaron Donald. You look at him, in a vacuum. You look at him by himself, and he's clearly the best defensive player in the NFL. But if he's not complemented by some other strong players, some other strong pass rush, then it makes it a lot tougher. So I think you're seeing a little bit of that over the first couple of weeks here.
Well, it's definitely the game to get right because he seems to love playing our Russell Wilson, Cameron.
Yeah, for sure. Wilson's a guy who he's sacked a bunch, and he's played against him a bunch as well, going up against him twice a year. But this is a favorable matchup for Donald against that Seahawks offensive line. But like Rich was saying, they got to have a complementary guy off the edge and on that defensive line. And I think Morgan Fox was an important player who really went kind of overlooked for the Rams in the past couple of years as that third down situational pass rusher comes in playing that defensive end spot. They're just not getting the same pass rush out of a guy like Ashawn Robinson through 4 games. So Fox was an important guy to come in on third down where the team, the offense is going to be throwing the ball, and you can really get after the quarterback. But Leonard Floyd, I think he's generated some pressure this year, even if the sack numbers aren't massive. Like Rich mentioned, Terrell Lewis, Obo Okoronkwo on the other side, those guys have to stay healthy, especially with Justin Hollins out for most of the season now. That's an important spot to get some pass rush from.
Yeah, and heading into the game on the injury report there that we saw on Tuesday, Tyler Higbee, Darrell Henderson, and Taylor Rapp were all on the injury report for a sort of limited participation in practice. But I'd assume all are expected to play tonight.
Yeah, it looks that way. They were actually we got the actually just as we were talking here, got the injury report for Wednesday, and those guys were all full participants. So looking good there. I think they were being pretty. Obviously, Darrell Henderson played in that game with some sore ribs, which could not have been a lot of fun. But he was able to get through the game, and I think they're just kind of keeping an eye on him in practice this week. But yeah, those guys should be good. Other than as Cameron mentioned, Justin Hollins being out, and obviously the guys who have been out for the full season. It's a good time. These turnarounds can be tough here when you're talking about going from Sunday to Thursday. And it's not a lot of time if you have a guy who's trying to work his way back. So I think it worked out in the Rams' favor a little bit, and probably Seattle too. Is just it's not later in the year when you have a few more injuries popping up. You're relatively healthy at the beginning of the year. So Darrell Henderson was the big question, but he was able to make it through that full game against Arizona. So it looks like as long as he doesn't have another unfortunate hit, it looks like he'll be ready to go.
Cameron, we know all the players now that are going to be available. What do you think against this Seahawks is more important? Is it going to be getting the defensive scheme right? We know how much they like to play against this Seattle offensive line. Or is it getting Stafford back clicking and getting that offense going and causing as much damage as possible?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about the Rams offense in this one. Seattle's given up the most yards in the NFL through 4 games, which is quite surprising. But teams are running the ball with success against them. So I think Darrell Henderson's going to have a nice game, especially with the way the offensive line played last week or on Sunday against the Cardinals. They're opening up some big holes. And I think you're going to see some of that again on Thursday night against the Seahawks. So not really worried about the offense, but slowing down Russell Wilson's always a challenge. Even when you think you have him, he's going to make a play outside the pocket and find a receiver down the field. And when you're going up against Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, it's never an easy matchup, even when you do have someone like Jalen Ramsey. So I think getting the defense right is a critical part of this game. Slowing down the power running of Chris Carson and kind of limiting him too. Really, the Rams just have to get back on track defensively because it was not pretty against the Cardinals. And this isn't much easier of a matchup going up against Russell Wilson and Metcalf and all those other guys.
Speaking of the offensive line, what is in the water in LA to keep getting Andrew Whitworth on the field every week?
It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, he's 39 years old. He's going to turn 40 this year, and honestly, guys, I mean, he looks like he gets in better shape every year. I don't understand. Whatever he's eating or drinking, like I want some of it because he's doing a lot better than I am. I can tell you that much. And it's just to see him. I mean, he's not losing it on the field either. I mean, you can. He's just so technically good with the things that he does, and I feel like it's almost the Rams just keep stringing this out. I mean, they thought he was going to be gone a couple of years ago. They thought that they kind of had the plan in place. They drafted a guy who they thought, okay, in a year or so, when Andrew Whitworth retires, we will bring around this young guy, Joe Noteboom, and now they're to the point where Joe Noteboom's contract is almost expiring, and Andrew Whitworth's still here. So it's amazing. It's like this plan that they had, thinking that they were going to have to replace this guy in a couple of years. They just don't need it. And knock on wood, he's had a couple injuries here and there, as guys do. You turn an ankle or something like that. He had the knee last year that kept him out for a while, but he's been able to stay so healthy and consistent. And beyond that, it's just the leadership that he brings to that offensive line. It's just irreplaceable. So yeah, it's worked out. When you looked at 2018 and 2019, you thought, wow, that really worked out well for the Rams, but it's worked out for years longer than they thought it would.
Yeah, and looking at the last season, especially the Rams went 2-1 against the Seahawks, including that wildcard weekend win in Lumen Field. And coming out of those games last season, there seems to have been, well, there always was a rivalry, but seems to have intensified a little bit with Jamal Adams, of course, going to the podium with a cigar after clinching the NFC West in that second game. And then, of course, Jalen Ramsey sending them to Cabo for the off season, and then of course the guys having a little fun back when the Rams lost as well. Also full circle that I realized, I think it was reading a piece from, I think it was from your colleague Jordan Rodrigue, saying that actually Matt Stafford's trade was finalized in Cabo as well. So it was kind of full circle there too. But yeah, it's definitely the rivalry has intensified just last season, and we could see maybe a little bit of edge heading into this game tonight.
Yeah, Jamal Adams has really taken that to another level since he's been traded to Seattle. He's a guy who's instigating a lot of that, and Jalen Ramsey likes to talk to, and he was part of that. Sent him to Cabo, and DK. He has a pretty good competitive spirit with DK Metcalf when they're on the field. Mutual respect for each other, but this is definitely a rivalry that these guys get up for every time they square off twice a year. And it's fun to see. I think we'll see Jamal Adams with some intensity on the field. And hopefully, I know the Rams haven't been using Jalen Ramsey to shadow number one receivers this season, but hopefully we get to see him on DK Metcalf a little bit tonight, because it's a heavyweight fight every time they go up against each other.
Yeah, Rich, it seems to be Ramsey has been playing more in the sort of slot corner position now at the start of this season.
Yeah, that's one thing that Brandon Staley actually brought in a little bit last year, the star position where they can kind of move him around a little bit. And, you know, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you have a guy like that who can just do anything on the field, it's like you've got a talent like that. How do you utilize it the best? Not unlike the way you would move a receiver around on the field and put him in advantageous positions, things like that. But the thing you have to have behind it is you have to have those corners who can still handle it. And that's where the Rams struggled a little bit this past week. And not to put it on one person, because it absolutely was not. It was not on one person. It was a full defense failure. But David Long really struggled in pass coverage last year. And he's a guy, along with Darius Williams at corner, who, if you're going to use Jalen in those different ways, if you're going to put him closer to the line of scrimmage or put him in the slot or whatever, then you need to make sure that those other guys can handle some of those responsibilities on the outside. And it just didn't happen last week. And everybody has a bad game. Everybody has a bad week. So it's not to say that there won't be a bounce back this week, but that's really what's been kind of hurting the Rams here. These 20+ yard plays, even the 30-40 yard passes. That's what this defense is really designed to limit, and that's really where they've been bitten over the last couple of weeks. So whatever they decide to do with Jalen, this is definitely an interesting matchup with DK Metcalf. Do you want to shadow him? How much do you want to limit his effectiveness? I don't know. I tend to think you do. I tend to think that's probably the matchup you want to go with there, but obviously the Rams are going to keep that pretty close to the vest, and we'll find out on the first drive of the first quarter tonight.
I guess Lockett kind of adds a little wrinkle into that as well. He is their leading receiver at the moment, so having that extra second threat makes it a little bit more of a headache to try and decide where your top corner is going to go.
Yeah, and Arizona had they did a great job. I mean, Cliff Kingsbury did a great job in that game. Kyler Murray did a great job. I mean, they were throwing to Max Williams. They made him look pretty good. They were throwing to their running backs even and getting them involved. So it was like you did not know where they were going to hit you next or how they were going to. And that's really what you have to do against this Rams defense. So, yeah, I agree. Seattle has some of the weapons to pull that off too. So the Rams are going to have to definitely tighten up there.
Cameron, maybe you can give me a little bit of hope coming into Thursday for Robert Woods. We seen Sean McVay the other day release a statement saying we have to get Robert Woods back in the action. Do you foresee maybe a little bit of a better game from maybe not even fantasy football wise, but just in general?
Yeah, I kind of steered people the wrong way this offseason, saying he would be the better pick than Kupp in fantasy. And I've been wrong about that. But Woods is such a steady guy. He's such a solid receiver who does everything well. And he's a great blocker. He's a good route runner. And I think he has some speed to really be that deep threat in this offense too. We just haven't seen it connect between him and Stafford yet. He looked kind of frustrated after his garbage time touchdown on Sunday, and he wants the ball because what receiver doesn't. But I think this is a favorable matchup against a not so great Seattle secondary, and with teams even I don't remember which corner it was on the Cardinals, but he admitted after the game that they really focused on slowing down Cooper Kupp, especially on third down. So as you see teams do that to Kupp, I think you're going to see more opportunities for Woods. And Stafford has said he's not necessarily focusing on Kupp. He's going through his reads, and the coverage is going to dictate where the ball goes. And if a guy's open, he's going to go there. But Kupp has been his first read on a lot of these plays, and hopefully we'll see a little bit more of Robert Woods getting involved.
Yeah, Chris, and the current offensive coordinator for the Seahawks is Shane Waldron, who was working with the Rams last year. Is there any sort of, I wouldn't say fear, but maybe it's change up the game plan for Thursday so that it is sort of new stuff that we're coming into the game that maybe Waldron would not have been privy to in the past?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, even some of the terminology or something like that. But I'd go back to where we kind of started with it. I mean, this is a very different Rams offense than it was last year. I mean, obviously, there's certain concepts or philosophies that Sean McVay has had since 2017 that aren't going to change. So certainly, Shane Waldron has that kind of institutional knowledge. He knows Sean McVay. He knows how he operates, kind of maybe how he thinks in certain situations. But this is a very different offense than it was last year. I mean, they were trying to manage Jared Goff a little bit last year. They weren't taking a lot of deep shots. They weren't able to work certain areas of the field, and now it's kind of opened up quite a bit where they can beat you in pretty much any area of the field. So I guess if I was Shane Waldron, I would look more back to the 2018 game film or things like that than I would look to my experiences with Sean McVay last year because I think it's changed a lot. But that's these things cut. I mean, these coaches even hang out together. I mean, they have these seminars that they have in the summer, and they all talk shop. So I don't really think there's too many secrets. But if a guy knows your tendencies a little bit, I think there's a little, maybe get in your head a little bit. So I'm sure Shane Waldron will be trying to jog his memory and think of what Sean McVay did in certain situations, and maybe that pays off at some point. But on the other hand, Sean McVay knows Shane Waldron also, so maybe it cuts both ways.
Yeah. Very true. Before we let you go, I want to get a prediction from you guys. So first of all, I want you to tell us who's going to win the score. And currently at the moment, the under over is 54. So if you think it's going to, if we're going to hit the under or the over, Cameron, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, I know the spread's 2.5, and it feels like this is kind of an obvious pick, but I'm going to go with the Rams 27-24. It goes just under the total. And I know there's been a couple of blowouts and lopsided scores between these teams, but they're a little bit more evenly matched right now. Some things to figure out defensively for the Rams that I think the Seahawks are going to exploit a little bit. And then on this other side, it's the same way almost with the Rams offense going up against this defense. So 27-24 is my pick with the Rams winning.
Yeah, that feels about right to me. I mean, I might go a little. I'd be more confident about the under. It just doesn't feel like it's going to turn into a particularly high scoring game to me. Seattle's defense played pretty well. I mean, San Francisco's had its own issues, but Seattle played its best defensive game of the season on Sunday. So I think the Rams will be able to score on them. They have been under Sean McVay. So maybe I'd be pretty close to that, to Cameron's prediction there. I might say 24-21 Rams or something like that. Clearly I could see the Rams getting anywhere from 24 to 28 points in that range. The difference is going to be, are they going to be able to bounce back? Because if they give up 37 like they did against Arizona, then obviously they're going to be in bad shape. So if they can keep that defensive number down to 20, 21, 24, I think the Rams win a narrow victory.
Okay, so I have to change my bets then.
Who knows? I mean, everybody was convinced, honestly, like when the Arizona the Rams were -6 against Arizona, that came out, and then that kind of drew my attention, and a lot of people on Twitter were like, oh no, Arizona, they're not, you don't need to worry about them. And then, well, guess what happened? So you never know. Trust your instincts, Jake. That's what I would tell you. Trust your instincts.
Appreciate it. They're always wrong, but I will try.
That's why, unfortunately, he's bottom of our prediction league at the moment.
Oh.
So that's why his instincts aren't treating him well at the moment.
Usually, what I do is I'll say, "What are my instincts?" and then I'll do directly the opposite of
Yeah.
that when I'm betting money on it.
Excellent stuff, guys. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. Before we let you go, first of all, Rich, where can people find your work and the podcast?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you can search 11 Personnel or pretty much wherever you get podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're. But yeah, and then theathletic.com. Jordan Rodriguez, thanks for the plug for her too. She does a fantastic job covering the team every day. So you can always get a good discount. We cover football over there also. So if any, we got an extensive team of beat reporters to cover all the Premier League teams in England. So appreciate it.
And Cameron, the same for yourself?
Yeah, over at the ramswire.usatoday.com. No podcast, but you can follow me on Twitter too at Cam DaSilva, and I'll be covering the Rams over there.
If you're looking for a podcast, I'm sure we might find a position here if you're really looking to talk to someone. Then we might butt heads a little bit because I'm a Seahawks fan, so we might have to hold that job offer until maybe after Thursday's game to find out if it's still going. Well, guys, thanks again so much for taking the time to speak to us. We hope to speak to you again maybe some point later on in the season. Hope you enjoy the game.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You too. Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the Seahawks side of things with Michael-Shawn Dugar. And welcome back to the Under Center podcast on this Thursday night football preview show. Looking ahead, of course, to the Rams versus Seahawks game later on tonight. We just had Rich Hammond and Cameron DaSilva on speaking about the Rams side of things. It was great to speak to them, and we hope they enjoy the game, and we'll speak to them again in the future. But joining us now to talk about the Seahawks side of things, we have Michael-Shawn Dugar, who is, of course, from The Athletic and host of the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast. Mike, it's so great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Doing excellent. Little nervous for the game later, I will admit. Quite nervous for the game later.
Yeah, there's good reason to be from the Seahawks perspective. The Rams are really good, and I don't think that you can look at the Cardinals game and be like, let's just do that, because the Cardinals have players that the Seahawks don't. So I can understand the nerves.
Yeah, of course. And it is that sort of thing where the way the division has been set up the last few years, where it is the Seahawks always beat the 49ers. The 49ers always beat the Rams, but the Rams are always beating the Seahawks. Sean McVay seems to have this sort of Pete Carroll's number, especially, of course, last year beating them twice in 3 games.
Yeah, the rivalry is not going well for Pete. I mean, I know it didn't go well before when Jeff Fisher was the coach of the Rams, but I don't think that's necessarily relevant or instructive currently, since Jeff doesn't coach the Rams anymore. Like, what's going on with the Rams matters in the present, I think, a little bit more. Like, I think Pete's 3-6, playoffs included. Since acquiring Jalen Ramsey, the Seahawks are averaging, I think, 17 points a game against the Rams defense. Like, their offense has been just pretty trash in the 4 games since the Rams got Ramsey. So that goes all the way back to December of 2019. Even Seattle's wins, I mean, they won on a Cooper Kupp drop in 2017. They only gave up 10 points that game. So it's like, that was a good game, at least defensively. That was a full Legion of Boom game. One of the last few full Legion of Boom games, 2017. And then 2019, they won on a missed kick by Greg Zuerlein. The Seahawks did. So it's like, they're winning by the skin of their teeth, with the exception of the Week 16 win last year. And then when they lose, like, it's pretty convincing for the Rams. I mean, the 2018 games were both one possession, but the Rams were definitely the better team in those games. I think the Seahawks could have won the first one, if not for like a false start or something like that, and some coaching miscues by Pete, to no surprise. But I think they were the Rams felt like the better team. They went to the Super Bowl that year. So, I mean, they were the better team. And then let's see, the 2019 games. Yeah, like I said, they went on a kick, then smoked the Seahawks down in LA. The game in LA last year didn't feel particularly close. Russ threw 2 picks. Like, it just, even in the playoff game, was a disaster. To playing the Rams in three times in 9 weeks last year got a lot of people in Seattle's organization fired, and got 2 people in the Rams organization new jobs, and got some Rams free agents paid, like John Johnson, Troy Hill. So, I mean, it's not been good for Pete Carroll against Sean McVay. Like, Sean McVay has proven to be the better head-to-head coach in this matchup, and it's not even particularly close.
Yeah, but of course, though, they're playing in the action green, though, tonight. So obviously that automatically means that they are going to win, because they always win in action green.
Yeah, the 2019 game on the missed kick is an action green. Let's see. The other 2 wins are not action green, but I mean that it still counts. I think the 2019 missed kick was super fluky. I mean, I think Pete Carroll joked after the game that was Paul Allen who came from above and blew some air and pushed it to the right, because that was the game he went into the Ring of Honor. Paul did, because he had died the year before. But I mean, it was so fluky. If you remember, Tedrick Thompson had an interception that the ball almost barely touched the ground. It was very reminiscent of Julian Edelman's Super Bowl catch against the Falcons. The tip of the ball breathes on shades of turf, some blades of turf. It was really, really, really close. And then they won that game with the action green. I think that's the same game Tyler has that miraculous catch in the end zone. But it's not surprising things have changed since then, because you look at, I think Russ in that game, in 2019 game, the action greens, threw 3 touchdown passes against Marcus Peters, at least 1. And then they traded Marcus and Aqib Talib, brought in Jalen Ramsey, and then their defense got nasty. They didn't make the playoffs that year, but clearly we see that then the following year they had the best defense in the league. So I really think that it cannot be overstated how bad this matchup has been for Pete Carroll. And I isolate Carroll and not one side of the ball, because it's oscillated, right? I think I'm using that word correctly. It starts off as the offense has been bad against McVay and the defense is bad against McVay, or vice versa. That just means it's the coach, right? If both sides just take turns being stinky against one dude. And that's a dude who had Jared Goff at quarterback. So I'd be very concerned if I was Seattle this week. Now, if I was a player, they're always confident, but just in general, everyone else should be worried.
Well, look, normally, Mike, I'm a Washington fan. Jake, our other co-host, is not with us at the moment, as a Giants fan, so we're used to not having very good football teams to cheer for. Dara's not so used to this, so we have to give him something positive to look forward to for this game. Where are the positive for the Seahawks? For me, at least, I think it's the fact that you have Metcalf and Lockett playing very well so far this season. I think having the 2 of them on the same wavelength is going to cause a couple of problems for the Rams, given that Jalen Ramsey can only cover 1 at a time. So maybe that's a place where the Seahawks fans can look forward to seeing some positivity.
I don't know. Metcalf been really, really bad against Jalen Ramsey. I mean, it's Russ too. It's not just DK, but I think DK averages 72 yards a game for his career and about 4.5 catches, I think. And those numbers against Ramsey specifically dropped to 28 yards and 2.2 catches or something in that range. The bottom line is he's not nearly as good when lined up against number 20 or number 5, whatever numbers Jalen's wearing at the time. So I'd be really concerned about that. I was actually in the middle of writing a preview talking about that, and then I just remembered I don't have a preview due today. So I got 1,000 words on this particular matchup sitting in a Word document. That's how I have the numbers all fresh on my brain. It will never come out, but I have them. So I think my reason for optimism is the Shane Waldron and the run game. Because the more you study the Rams in particular, the more Pete Carroll's comments after the year make sense. Look, if we're gonna beat the Rams, we should run the ball. And that's not like as frustrating as that may sound for people in Seattle. No, I get it. Like that matters, because what the Rams do is they're designed to, they work top down. So they play like a too high shell with their safeties, basically saying we dare you to run it. And the way that they try to combat that, there's two main ways. One of them is how they teach their linemen to not only be responsible for one gap, like the gap in front of you or whatever. They're like 1.5. Like you're responsible for this gap and the backside of this gap or whatever. It's very tough for linemen to do that, but they pull it off. It helps when you have Aaron Donald. The second way they do that, at least this year, what I've seen, is they bring Jordan Fuller, their strong safety. They basically use him as a linebacker in run support who starts 15 yards back, essentially. So he's like coming from depth. And you're watching the Cardinals game. The Cardinals really exploited that because they blocked well up front. This is what you need against the Rams as well. They blocked well, so James Conner and Chase Edmonds weren't even getting to Fuller and he was making tackles. He's a really good tackler, Fuller is. But he wasn't even getting to the ball carrier until they had like 5-6 yards. So if you're doing that and you're getting those going, and then you have Kyler Murray, the running games becomes a really good way to beat the Rams defense. And then you just throw it where Jalen Ramsey's not, which is what the Cardinals did as well. So if Alex Collins starts, if Chris Carson starts, I just think that with Shane and Andy Dickerson, who Shane brought with him from LA, he's the run game coordinator now. They know the importance of the run game. And I think that's going to be very critical. And I think Alex Collins is well suited to run well against these guys. Chris is as well. I'm not really sure about Travis Homer or DJ Dallas, but the upshot of this is like, okay, hey, wait, we got Alex Collins and we got a OC who knows that we have to run the ball to beat these guys. And that's going to be the key, because I don't think that was the case in the two games, the week 16 and the wild card matchup for Seattle. It just didn't matter in the week 16 because Jared Goff broke his thumb. But it clearly mattered in the wild card game that they lost.
Yeah. And what have you made of the running game? Because looking back at the game last week against San Francisco, I thought, especially in the third and fourth quarter when they had the lead, I thought they ran the ball quite well, into not just obviously with the Alex Collins touchdown, but keeping the chains moving, keeping the clock ticking over, which is one thing that they didn't do particularly well in their first home game in the year against the Titans, which of course they were up by 2 scores at multiple occasions, where in the second half they didn't really run the ball, which means they didn't hold onto the ball for as much as they can, which obviously played a part in them losing that game. So like you mentioned, it's going to be important to run the ball and to beat the Rams. Could we see, have you been, I guess, have you liked the improvement that we've seen since Sunday?
With the run game specifically?
Yeah.
I think the run game's just been fine. I think it was fine last year, to be honest. Chris's numbers, he was really efficient last year. He didn't have the volume because he missed a bunch of games, but that makes sense. But he was really efficient. He was top 5 in like a lot of good efficiency numbers. He caught the ball really well, which was important when Russ was cooking, because your running backs need to be involved in that whole pass first offense thing. So I thought all that was really good. It's been efficient this year as well. I don't think Chris has been as efficient. I think his game on Sunday really dropped his efficiency numbers. He had been doing really well before that. I use expected points added, like an advanced metric, when I track run game stuff. His numbers aren't great there because he's fumbled already and lost that fumble. And he lost that deep in his own territory, which can swing your expected points when you give the other team the ball, when they're damn near in the red zone afterwards. So that Chris's numbers are a little skewed that way, at least the advanced ones. But I think it's been fine. The blocking has been inconsistent, and I think that's really important. It's been bad on a lot of Chris carries. Like it honestly wasn't super great against the Colts. There was just some plays that Chris turned nothing into something. It was particularly good on the 33-yarder he had on the short yardage where Will Dissly just clears out Darius Leonard, which I don't know how, that's kind of fluky. Will's a good blocker, but that's tough sledding. I think like to count on consistently as good as Darius Leonard is. So I think the blocking needs to be a lot more consistent. I think everyone needs to be involved in the run game as blockers too, because you look at on the tape, Will's really good. Gerald Everett is really good. So hopefully he plays in this game as well. And that includes, the receivers. one of those plays that comes to mind against the Colts, Tyler gets blocked like into Chris. Chris ends up like 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, like damn near right after he touches the ball. He turns it into like a 4-yard gain though, because Chris is Chris. But then you look at the Vikings game on the flip side of that, DK Metcalf holds off, I think, Patrick Peterson. That springs Chris for the 30-yarder or however long that was for his touchdown in that game. So like everyone needs to be good at the run blocking. It's not just the linemen, it's not just the tight ends, it's the receivers. And Russ needs to do his part and recognize the fronts and the run boxes that are advantageous. Like there was a couple against the Niners that like I could tell just looking, I was like, this is gonna be, if this is a run, this is gonna suck, right? Because there was like 8 guys there, one of them being Fred Warner. So like I think they need to do a better job running into lighter boxes, which they're gonna get a ton of against the Rams. That's really good. And the blocking just needs to be a lot more consistent. It's been okay, but really inconsistent. It needs to be like perfect on Thursday for them to win.
One way that could help the run game is obviously if Wilson can spread the ball a little bit and, like you said, really force that lighter box, which always helps run games. How have you found his play over the last this season and the end of last season? Is it a little bit worrying that he has had good numbers, but the win columns haven't necessarily been ticking over as they had before? And maybe he has certainly been accused of in some respects of trying to do a little bit too much and go for the over the top play to really drag the team out when maybe he should have played a little bit more conservatively. Is that something you agree on, or how have you felt he's been playing over the last few games?
The last few games, I think he's been fine. I mean, he was really good against the Niners. I thought like that was Russ saving their ass on Sunday. I mean, the touchdown run, the throw to Freddie Swain for a touchdown. He just made some stuff happen. And the blocking got better in that game as well. He was really good against the Colts. I thought he was fine against the Titans too, despite what Pete Carroll said about his overtime sequence. Like Russ has been solid. I mean, leads league in passer rating, which isn't like the end all be all, but I mean, he's got a bunch of advanced metrics that work in his favor too. He's been really efficient. He's thrown the ball downfield. He hasn't turned the ball over. The only knock, he keeps taking a bunch of sacks. I mean, some of his pass protection has been crappy, but guys who take sacks, that's pretty consistent, whether they have good protection or bad protection, which makes sense considering sacks are a QB stat. I think right now, in particular on third down, Russ leads the league in sack percentage. Either that or he's second to Houston rookie Davis Mills, which isn't good. You don't want to be next to Davis Mills in any statistic right now because he's playing poorly. So I think that's the area where I want to see Russ be a little bit, actually not be a lot better, because there's going to be times when his pass protection lets him down. And there were some times like that against the Rams for Kyler Murray in week 4. And he just made it so that it didn't matter. So I think Russ's job, if you're looking for an area for Russ to improve in, I don't think it's spreading the ball around a little bit more. I really don't care whether the tight ends get catches. Like, I think that's way too much of a thing in Seattle, just like as a tight end group. Gerald should get a lot of touches because Gerald's very good, especially with the ball in his hands. But in general, a team that has DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I don't really care who else catches the ball. You throw it to them 20 times a game, I feel you, right? That's good. It's really good. But just avoiding the negative plays. Russ runs himself and holds the ball into negative plays, and you just cannot do that in this game against the Rams, because you will lose and you will be in the ice bath for a very long time after the game if that happens.
What have you you mentioned a little bit about the offensive line. What have you made of Kyle Fuller so far this season? Because there was a lot of talk on Seahawks Twitter to try and use that second round pick that they had this year on one of the centers, like Landon Dixon, Creed Humphrey, Quinn Miners as well was up there too. But he decided to obviously go for D. Eskridge and promote Kyle Fuller as the starting center. How have you felt he's performed so far this year?
That's interesting. You asked me that. Let me look at. I did use oscillating, right? That's a good word. Anyway, sorry. I was in that preview that I said is never going to come out. I was looking at some center numbers because in my previews, what I do is I have who I expect a big game from, X Factor, and some other stuff. My X Factor was actually going to be Kyle Fuller. I'm not an expert on center play. I'm not. That's one of those where I lean on other people in the numbers a bit more than other positions for the most part. His numbers are bad. Like he's given up, I think 8 pressures, and that's like 7th most among centers. He's got the 2nd highest pressure percentage allowed among qualifying centers. So that's guys who at least played, I think, 100 offensive snaps according to Pro Football Focus. His Pro Football Focus grade is really poor, like bad. I don't put a ton of stock into the grades themselves. Like if you read my stuff, you'll see me cite True Media a lot. I like their stuff a little bit more. It's tied to Pro Football Focus. They use a lot of they legitimately used each other's numbers. I think Pro Football Focus has a deal with them. But the good thing is in True Media, you can click on like those 8 pressures I said. I can click on them and it's got a hyperlink straight to Game Pass. So I can go see which play he's getting credited for and be like, I don't know if that's on Kyle or whatever. And it takes the subjectivity out of it a little bit, especially since someone like me, I covered a team and can ask a player or somebody or a coach specifically about that play. All of that, though, Kyle needs to be better. That's why he was going to be my X factor, because you can't have bad reps against Aaron Donald, which is really unfair because you're probably going to play like anywhere from 60 to 80 snaps in the game, but you just can't you have to play 60 to 80 perfect snaps. The one bad snap is going to get your quarterback's ribs killed, and I think that I've watched all 22 of each game. That's the coach's film allowing you to see every play from multiple angles. The O-line has been like okay, but you specifically highlight the interior guys. They can be a lot better, and that in this particular game, I think starts with Kyle, who's been okay. Like I thought he was good against the Niners, specifically in the second half, but overall, I think if you're talking about pass protection, which is only one element of a center's job, to be clear, there's a lot of other jobs, but specifically when pass protection, which again, priority in this game, I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
Is there the depth in that offensive line to maybe give him a little dig out, kind of double team, maybe even triple team Aaron Donald on some occasions?
Yeah, no, you definitely should. Even if there wasn't depth, I mean,
just put bodies in the way, put 300-pound men in between you and the quarterback.
I think the Dolphins last year quadruple teamed Aaron on one snap. I think there's a viral picture of that out there. Because I mean, and I don't blame them. I don't. I think that was like Tua's first start, maybe as well. So that makes sense. Protect your rookie quarterback at all costs, but protect your $140 million quarterback at all costs too. Protect your quarterback at all costs, really, is the moral of the story. So I think, double teams, chips. I mean, for example, still that doesn't even work all the time. So when I was looking up his pressures and his first start last year, which was against the Rams in Week 10, he gave up 3, 2 of them to Aaron Donald, which it's not the worst thing in the world, but 2 of them are like both pressures where Aaron Donald split a double team. Like it was Kyle Fuller and the left guard, which in one case was Ayupati and the other was Jamarco Jones. Aaron just splits them both and goes straight to Russell's chin. And, Russell avoided a sack each time by just throwing the ball. But, you got to double team Aaron Donald. You got to, slide protection his way. You got to put a running back there. You got to move the pocket. You have to do everything. And, again, you just can't mess up. The minute you mess up, it's Russ gets hit in the chin, and that's just not good.
Yeah. Well, hopefully with Shane Waldron's history of being with the Rams and maybe with a bit more motion, moving Russ out of the pocket a bit more, we can sort of see Aaron Donald not be a factor in the game for once when it comes to a Rams Seahawks game. I want to flip to the other side of the ball quickly before we let you go, Mike, and talk about this defense, because they've allowed, I think I saw the most yards per game this season. We're kind of back at the start of last season again when I think it was the exact same thing. But the cornerback position has been an issue all season so far, and of course Trey Flowers has been getting sort of the brunt of the backlash on Twitter especially, and he was taken out this past week for Sidney Jones, and DJ Reed was brought over to the other corner position, which helped him because that was more his natural position where he excelled last year. how are these cornerbacks going to stop the likes of Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods this evening?
It's gonna be tough because they're gonna have to cover for a long time. I think Matt Stafford has the lowest sack percentage in the league. I think it's like 2%, which is really, really, really. I think Russ is like 6 or something. Like the Russ is as high as usual, and then Stafford is low, which is bad news for Seattle. Although I guess the flip side of that is Arizona didn't sack Stafford at all, and they held him to 20 points. Although Tyler Higbee dropped a touchdown in that game on 4th and goal, and the kicker missed a kick. I mean, that's another 10 points right there. That has nothing to really do with quarterback pressure. So take that stat with a grain of salt, I guess. But they're going to have to cover for a very long time. They're going to have to avoid coverage busts and mistakes. You really just can't have that against this team. I mean, Arizona had very few of them, and that helped them. They forced Matt into some bad throws. He made a lot of bad throws against the Cardinals, specifically on 3rd down. And honestly, that is where that's the money down in this game for both teams. But we can talk about it from the defense's view. LA has one of the best 3rd down offenses in the league. Seattle's 3rd down defense is average, but it really just comes down to beating the guy in front of you. Can you do that? That's really how they beat the Niners. The Niners were 2 of 14 on 3rd down. That's 1 week after the Vikings were 9 of 14. Like that's your ball game right there. Last week it was use Ryan Neal against George Kittle. That was a game changer. Ryan Neal played out of his mind and really helped limit San Francisco's best offensive player. There's not an obvious matchup for them to do something similar. The best I could possibly think of is to put DJ Reed on Cooper Kupp in those obvious passing situations, still in that dime look, bring in Ryan, but just that's your man matchup, and then you can work everything around that. Similar to what the Rams are going to do is Ramsey. When it's 3rd down, Ramsey's probably just going to go guard DK, and then everything else is built around, okay, based on where DK lines up, how do we adjust our defense accordingly on this down? The Seahawks, if I was them, I would do something very similar. I would maybe use DJ or Sidney, whoever you want, but my vote would be DJ. Use DJ, and wherever Kupp lines up, that's where he goes, and you build your 3rd down defense around that. Other than that, you just got to get to Matt. Like, coverage be damned, go get to Matt, because then it doesn't matter how long you guys cover if you get a sack. I think those are probably some of your best bets because this Rams passing game is damn good, and the Arizona game is going to prove to be an outlier once we get through all 17 games this season. I can promise you that.
Well, then would it help them probably to do, like you mentioned, similar to what they did against the 49ers and bring in that 6 DB package for Ryan Neal and then allow Jamal Adams the freedom to blitz and probably go after Matt?
I don't know where this came from. I heard Mike Salk ask Pete this after the game. The dime thing has nothing to do with Jamal. Pete's even said it twice. There's just really no correlation to Ryan coming on the field, giving Jamal more freedom. Jamal already plays a lot. He rushes the passer. He's in the run fits. He covers the flat. He is the middle of the field safety sometimes, which I think he was on Quandre's interception, where Quandre was like the rover, I guess, or whatever, however you want to call it, robber, whatever, and was able to roam the middle and take the Kittle pass away. Like Jamal's already doing a ton of stuff in this defense. And I mean, he can do, I guess, a little more when Ryan's in or any 6 DB is in, but I don't think that's connected in any way. They're using Jamal in a lot of different ways. It's very similar to how the Rams are using Ramsey. They have him in the middle, but they can move him around where need be. The difference is, I guess, Jamal's strength is rushing the passer, whereas Ramsey's is like going out and playing man coverage. But either way, both of those guys are being put around the ball as often as possible, which is really good. So Jamal already has all that freedom to do all that. It's just a matter of can the other guys around him execute on 3rd down. That's really what it was against the Niners, whether it was Ryan or the pass rush or Sidney Jones had a pass breakup on 3rd down. It's really just about beat the guy in front of you on 3rd down, whether you got 6 DBs or 1 DB on the field, to be honest. So, yeah, but that said, I would use the plan that I outlined, but not because it gives Jamal freedom, just because I think it'll work.
Okay. And just, I want to get your prediction for the game, but just one more question that came into my head there while you were speaking about Jamal, is Jordan Brooks, who has seemed to have been benched for periods of games in the last couple of weeks. In this season, especially, where I think a lot of Seahawks fans are hoping he'll take that next step forward and start to become, I wouldn't say as much as say the heir apparent to Bobby Wagner, but definitely to be the next Seattle leader in that linebacking group.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they are thinking. The heir apparent's a good way to put that. I mean, that's the thought process. But you take a inside linebacker, a first round pick, when your current inside linebacker's 30 plus, that makes sense. But yeah, it just hasn't. I don't really understand the whole play Cody Barton thing. I never really got that earlier this year. I mean, if you take Jordan and you're willing to let KJ Wright walk in favor of Jordan, then Jordan's your guy. Like, that's not an open competition. I know always compete, but whatever. That gets skirted all the time. It's not like the always compete thing is not like a full on meritocracy, right? They've drafted one quarterback since then. If that was the case, he would always compete there too. Or some other positions, you can make that same argument. So I think if you're going to roll with Jordan, and that's it. However, I did see the reason for Ken Norton Jr. to take Jordan out in favor of Ryan in this particular matchup. That I think that having more speed and a guy who can shed blocks and hit, which is what you want your linebackers to do, I think that was a good move. I'm struggling with whether that's the move entirely in this game because, like I said, the mismatch is not there. Like, I think Jordan can cover anyone on the Rams, but I do think Ryan should play more. It's quite the conundrum, really. It's not as simple as put Ryan on the field more. Someone's got to come off, right? Only play 11 guys. So I think that's a tough spot for them. But yeah, I think Jordan's had an interesting year where, like you said, in like 3 of the 4 games, hell, probably all 4 at this point, they've been like, let's take Jordan off the field right quick. You don't want to see that. You don't want to see that anytime you have a first round pick in a position, but you definitely don't want to see that while you got 1 first round pick on IR again, and you got another first round pick, a healthy scratch 3 times in 4 weeks. Like, you need to get this first round pick thing right. So they're in a really tough spot with Jordan, I think. Not to say playing bad or good. That's not even the point of what I'm saying. The point is that the staff, their actions, damn their words, their actions suggest taking Jordan off the field occasionally makes us better, which, whoa, that's not good.
Yeah, definitely. And then before we let you go, Mike, what is your prediction for later on tonight? I see the Seahawks are 2.5 point underdogs, and the over/under is 54.5. What are you going for?
I'll take the over. I will take the over. Well, hold on. Let me do the math on my prediction. I think I got 27-23 Rams. I think the Rams. I'm kind of pulling that number out of my ass, but I do like the Rams. The numbers itself, I would have to finish my preview to really back those up. But yeah, I think 27-23 sounds about right. Is that the over? Let me see.
That'd be under.
That's the under. Okay, maybe I'll take the under then. So that'd be my prediction. I think it's going to be too tough for. Honestly, I just don't give the benefit of the doubt to Pete. I just don't. He's got the one win that I feel like was like legit. You were better than McVay that day type of thing, and that's all I got. That's one in like 9 meetings. Even if the 2018 meetings were close, I just don't trust him to get his team ready enough to do this. I just don't. It'll still be close. That's a close game. That's one turnover here or there from swinging it in either team's direction. So it's not going to expect them to get blown out, which they have before by McVay. But yeah, I think that the Rams right now are the better team, and they are more likely, based on their coach's history, to play like the better team, which is what really matters on Thursday.
Excellent stuff. Well, listen, Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to us today. We really appreciate it. Before we let you go, where can people find your work and your podcast?
Just follow me on Twitter at Mike Dugar. It's right there on the screen and spelled correctly, so that helps. Everything's there. The link to my author page where you can find all my stories, that is in my bio on Twitter. My podcast is always pinned to the top of my Twitter. So right there, my Twitter just becomes a one-stop shop for where you need to reach me.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. Thanks again so much. And we hope you enjoy the game later.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
No problem. And that is it for our Thursday night football preview. We hope you enjoy the Rams Seahawks game later on tonight. We'll be back next week with our week 5 preview show. Look out for our YouTube exclusive tomorrow, where we'll try and help you beat the bookies, get a bit of money before for this week 5 matchups. But until next time, stay safe. We'll see you soon.